Hello everyone, my name is Cicuits and welcome back to another Redstone video, and in this video I'll be showing you guys 24 circuits that you should know for building redstone in Minecraft. This thing here creates a 1-tick pulse for this piston here, which will then push this block over top of this redstone torch and then powers this piston forward with just one button press, but then it stays powered even with just one button press, as you will see here. So just like that, you can see it stays powered because this block is now over top of the torch, and if I press the button again, then it pulls the block back and the piston is no longer powered. So what's happening here is this redstone button is sending a pulse through this repeater into this block and into this piston here. So the pulse is received into this repeater, but then just a second or a tick later, this piston pushes upward because it's now being powered by this thing. It pushes upwards and cuts off the signal at just 1 tick, so it sends a 1-tick pulse through this piston, which then spits out, because this is a sticky piston. The sticky piston sticks out its block over top of this redstone torch and causes this piston to extend, but then it stays there because this piston spit out its block, as you can see there. And then it does the same thing. It sends a 1-tick redstone pulse through into this piston, and then the block is retracted. This is a much smaller version of this machine here, but it uses more droppers, and it uses 3 droppers and 1 hopper. The droppers are facing in a circle, as you can see with these arrows I've made here, and there is 1 item on the inside, which just happens to be redstone dust, just because. So when I click this button, this dropper will power and shoot the item into this dropper, and then this will shoot the item into this hopper, which will then drain into this dropper here, and then this comparator will detect it and put out a redstone signal, just like that. And you can see the redstone dust is now in this dropper here, and then this dropper, when I click the button again, will spit it into this dropper here, and then this will turn off because it no longer detects the item inside here, because the item is not inside there. Oopsies. It is now inside here again. So this thing is the same as this thing, but much smaller, but it does use a couple more resources. But sometimes I want a pulse that is a little bit longer than 1 tick, in which case I would use something like this, where it has a dropper facing upwards and a hopper on top of it facing back down into the same dropper, so that when I click this button, the dropper will fire into the hopper, but then the item will get immediately drained back down into the dropper, which will create not a 1-tick pulse, but a 2 or 3 tick pulse. I don't know the exacts, but you can see there it was pretty fast. It's not enough though. It's not enough to make a sticky piston spit out its block. As you can see, it's just long enough that it just extends and then retracts without spitting out the block. This here is a hopper timer, which I can turn on and off thanks to this switch here, and it has 1 item on the inside, as you can see, and these 2 hoppers are going into each other, so they're just draining back and forth, which, you know, logically doesn't really make sense, but it works in Minecraft. And then when the item goes into this hopper, this comparator detects the item, and then when it drains back, the comparator doesn't detect the item, so it turns off. But as you can see, if I turn off this switch, then the item will be free to go back and forth, and we get these pulses just like this. This here is a simple pulse extender. Well, it's not so simple. It does use comparators, which can be kind of confusing sometimes. But as you can see, if I click this button, the pulse will go around in a circle until the comparators run out of pulse or power in the pulse, and eventually just die out. As you can see here, it's getting weaker and weaker until it just dies completely. So I'll show you one more time. You can see the pulse is getting weaker and weaker until it just goes black, and then the whole pulse is shut off. So as you can see, if I put this on here, this is the length of a normal button press. This is the length of a pulse extender button press. Much longer, as you can see. This is a much simpler but much shorter pulse extender, because what happens is when I click this button, it powers the block, which then powers this redstone line, but then it also sends a signal through this repeater, which extends the signal into this block, which then also powers the exact same redstone line, as you can see there. So the length of a normal button press, the length of a pulse extender button press. It's just a little bit longer, but sometimes that can be really useful. I don't really know what this is called, but it can be useful in combination locks where you have to flip both switches in order for this to turn on. So if even one of the switches aren't turned on, then it turns off. So you need to have both switches turned on in order for this thing to turn on, which is really useful in locks. So basically, what's happening here is when I flip either one of these, the torches turns off, but the other torch is still powering this line. So both of them have to turn off. And then when this line is no longer powered, this torch can turn on because the block it is placed on is no longer powered. So it turns on and sends out a signal. But if either one of these torches is on, it powers the block, which unpowers the torch, and then the signal turns off. This here is a similar concept, but instead, if either one of the torches is, or if both of the torches are turned on, then the signal is turned off, and then if both of them are turned off, or if even one of them is turned off, then the signal is back on again. So basically, it's just this, but inverted. This here is a similar concept, but both of these have to be on in order for you to get a redstone output right there. So if this one's off, then this is not lit up and you don't have a redstone output. And if this is off, then you still don't have a redstone output. So they both need to be turned on in order for it to work, which is basically like that one there that I showed you earlier. This here is a simple double piston extender. So you can see if we click this button, it extends the block twice, or extends the block from here to out to there, which is 2 blocks further, as you can see. And then of course you can attach like a lever to this, or put this in a redstone contraption somewhere in order for it to like stay out right here, if you want that. But otherwise you can just leave it as this. This is a block detector pusher thing, I don't know. But basically when I place a block here, this observer facing upwards detects it and then sends a signal into this block, which then sends a signal into this here, which can then send a signal, or which then will either push or pull this observer here and light up this redstone and this observer here, and then it will push out the block. I know that was really hard to follow, but basically when I push the block down, it sends 1 pulse and then pulls the observer back to fire this once, and then this thing observes the fire and then pushes it forward so that it doesn't fire again, which can be a problem. And actually, I just discovered a much simpler way of doing that, which is just this thing here. You don't need any blocks or redstone at all. You just need the 2 observers and the 2 pistons. And as you can see, it does the exact same thing. Oh wow, this is nice to know. Moving on from that wonderful acknowledgement there, we have here a block swapper. As you can see, when I push the button, the blocks are swapped just like that, which is really hard to get the timings right. But basically what's happening is when I push this button, the torch turns off, and it does take, it waits a tick and then turns off, and then this piston pulls the block back. But then this thing is also powering this piston, but the piston doesn't realize it until this turns off and updates the piston. At the same moment this thing is turned off. So it happens all really fast, but it works, and it works wonderfully. This here is another double piston extender with, it includes 3 pistons, 3 sticky pistons and 1 observer facing at the top left piston here. And you can see when I click this button, the 2 bottom pistons will extend, pushing this observer and the piston into the air, and then the observer will send a pulse through the piston, pushing this block 1 up, or 1 further up, and that will extend the block to right there, as you can see. And then if I hit it again, you can see it brings the block back down. And this design works in any direction, as you can see, as long as all the pistons and observers are facing in the right direction, then it should work. This is another locking mechanism or something of the sort, where basically if I click this button, the entire thing flips, and then this line is powered here, but if I click it again, you can see nothing happens. So now the only way to reverse that is to click this other button, which then reverses this, and now this line is powered and this line is not. But then if you click it again, still nothing happens until you click this button. This here is another timing circuit, so if I turn this lever off, then you can see it will start going around in a very slow time, which is actually not useful. It's a very slow clock, but it's very simple at the same time, which is really nice. This is a much faster clock. As you can see, all you need to do is take a comparator, put it down and put redstone around it, and then actually make sure it's on subtract mode just like this, and then just put a lever on top of it and turn it on, which is, it's really easy to make, and it's super fast and super nice. This is an extendable hopper clock, where basically there's items in here shifting from one hopper to another. As you can see, the hoppers are draining into each other, and then when all the items have drained into this hopper, this piston will turn off, and then this piston here will turn on, and it will push the redstone block to this spot here, and then all the items from this hopper will start draining back into this hopper. And then once this hopper is empty, this one here, then the piston will pull back and this piston will push forward, and the whole thing will repeat itself. So if I just leave this off, or turn this off, as you can see, it flipped over, and now all the items are draining from this hopper into this hopper, and then eventually once this hopper is full, the block will push back. Just like that. There you go. This here is another pulse extender. You can see if I push the button, it will power this block and power this redstone, or it doesn't have to power redstone, it can power just anything just in that general direction. But then it will also go, the pulse will extend over here, and then into the same block, which will just extend the pulse, as you can see. So the length of a normal button press is that long, length of this button press is much longer, as you can see. This here is a flush double piston extender, and you can push it out and then pull it back in, and of course you can use a lever on here. It doesn't have to be a button, but I just showed the button so you can see the extension and retraction at the same time. This here is a simpler version of those things that I showed you way over there, but it only has 2 pistons instead of 3, and the observer doesn't move anywhere, as you can see. And I would say it's almost faster, but it is the length of a button press, so it's actually not that much faster. It's just a little bit less resourceful. Yeah, less resourceful in that it uses less resources. This here is a flying machine, or one of the various kinds of flying machines, where basically what happens if I click this button is this observer facing upwards will detect it, send a pulse through this piston here, which will then push all 4 of these blocks upward. And then this observer will detect the movement, send a pulse through this piston here, and then it will grab all 4 of these blocks and pull it up. And then it will start over, this piston will detect movement and send a pulse through this and push all 4 of these up. And basically it's just a repeating pattern that will just go up until forever. So as you can see, if I press this button, this thing will launch. As you can see, I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but it is happening very quickly, and it is working as I said. Moving on, we now have a door here, which is really nice. It's a 2x2 hipster door, where basically if I flip this lever, or when this lever is flipped, as it is now, this will power, this repeater will power this block here, which in turn powers this piston that is extended right there. And then it will also power this block here, which will then send a signal into this thing here, or into this piston here. But it all happens really fast, and so when I turn this off, this piston will unpower, and then this piston will unpower, dragging all of this down. And then when I turn it back on again, this block will power, and then this piston will power, which will push this piston into place in order for it to be powered and push up the door as well. It all happens very fast, and I know that was a very complicated way of saying it, but it is a very fast hipster door. It's super nice, and it only uses 2 pistons and a few bits of redstone. We are coming closer to the end, and here I have you an item filter system, which you can use to filter items such as redstone. And if I just grab some redstone here, you can see that we'll just grab something else random, but you can see that the redstone will filter through this system and nothing else. So if I put this in here, you can see it's not trap test, it's not draining at all because there is nothing to drain to. But if I put the redstone in there, you can see the redstone's draining through into this system here, and it going through this redstone into these things here, and then into the chest. But only the redstone is going through there. So if you had a water stream going over top of this hopper, the redstone would get sucked down through here and nothing else would. And that is because this thing is detecting the amount of blocks in here, which are only staying there because this torch is, well, technically turned on. But then when an item fills this thing detects it, will send a pulse through here, and then this torch will turn off. Oh, as you can see, it's turned on now. So that means all the redstone has drained through, and it's all in here now. Which means all the redstone has come through and nothing else has. This here is the last thing I'm going to show you, which is basically a pulsing, I don't even know what to call it, but basically it sends 6 pulses through this, because when I turn on this pulse extender here, it it allows this hopper clock here to have an item pass through them 6 times, and then the pulse extender stops and the torch turns on, and the the hopper clock stops working. So as you can see, if I press this, you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pulses through there until the hopper clock is turned on again and the item stops flowing through them. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, that is all I have to show for you today. So if you enjoyed today's video, then leave a like down below, and if you really enjoyed it, then consider subscribing, because that would help a lot. Yeah, I'll see you next time.